glorious purpose. I'm here. Take that card off. And who's hanging out with me today? Anybody? We talk about Loki. I'm going to keep the card. I'm going to do a kind of cartoony style drawing. I'm going to try to do more drawings, but less complex things. Well, we're talking about Loki season 1. And this was a fun one to watch week to week. I don't know if I think if you binge it, I don't think it's quite as fun. But I haven't gone back and watched it a second time yet, but I do plan on doing that. It seems like it'll be a fun one to do a rewatch with. So, Loki season 1. This was an interesting ride. It's definitely the most fun of the 3 Disney Plus shows we've gotten so far. I think that's owing to the fact that Loki's not a hero per se. I mean, he's the protagonist for this series, but not necessarily a good guy. And I think that actually works to the show's advantage, because they can do stuff with the villains that they couldn't do with the heroes, And they also can do well. I mean, stuff that they're going to push the bounds with socially. They can do it with the villains first, and then the heroes can catch up later. And by that I mean, there's a it's almost a throwaway line in the show that intimates that Loki may be bisexual or pansexual. Certainly bisexual. And that's not something they would be doing with Captain America, or And it also helps that his in the mythology, Loki got freaky in mythology too and stuff. He got down with horses and men, women, whatever. So I think they can get away with more in the show with Loki than they could if they were doing it with one of the straight-laced heroes. And I am one of those that think representation does matter, so I'm fine with having LGBTQ characters. And I look forward to the day when LGBTQ and minorities and women and we don't have to make a point of pointing it out that these characters are what they are. It's just characters there, and it's not the defining characteristic of them. And that's one of the things about the Loki; it wasn't a defining characteristic. So that was good. If you have anything in particular you'd like to talk about on the Loki show, go ahead and throw it in the comments, or I can throw the link in there. If you want to come in and actually just talk with me, which makes it easier for me, but I understand not everybody likes to be on stream. You can come in with mic only, so you don't have to have a camera. But let's talk about it. Like I said, it was a really fun series. I did have a ton of fun with the show. See, this cat, it's just a band, right? It's not a full. Yeah, I'm just going to do cartooning today, so I can keep things quicker and a little easier to try. If I try to draw like accurate portraits of people, then it obviously slows me down and it makes it harder for me to think about what I want to talk about because I'm focusing on the drawing. So I decided I'd just keep it simple today. So the promise of the Loki series when it was being advertised was kind of this buddy cop thing. And interesting, it's like only the first two episodes or second episode and half of the first one where we get that buddy cop thing with Mobius's character, or Owen Wilson's character Mobius, and it's almost like a hoodie. Um, Mobius's character. Um, the analyst from the TVA, and this is one of those things that's this is really a comic geek show because there's some really deep cuts. Like when they start talking about the TVA, even some of the sweaties I know had to go back and look up what the heck is a TVA. We're gonna drape Crocodile Loki over his shoulder here. It's kind of fun that the one defining characteristic of all the Lokis is this horns, the helmet with the horns. Well, except for boastful Loki who falls. But imagine if he wore a helmet, he'd probably have horns on it. Let's see. I'm going for this lady. Push his arm out. Is the music too loud? We'll run some royalty-free Nordic music. Because when no one's in the stream with me, it helps to have some sound in my ear. So the show picks up during the first Avengers movie, right? When Loki has been captured by the Avengers at Stark Tower, and the twist being that in this timeline, Hulk was upset that he had to take the elevator or had to take the stairs instead of the elevator. And when he comes down, he likes to knock people, bumps people around, and knocks Loki loose and knocks the Tesseract loose, and Loki's able to escape with the Tesseract. It's one of those, okay, it's a lot. You just have to roll with it because that's the premise for the story. You just have to let it go sometimes. Sorry, I need to. So one of the things I'm going to be jumping all over the place because I'm just kind of, unless someone has something in particular they want to talk about, I'm just going to kind of go where my thoughts take me on this show. There's a scene later on in the fifth episode when he meets up with these other variant Lokis. And Richard E. Grant obviously plays what they call classic Loki. And he tells the story of his timeline, um, where he fought Thanos, and in his timeline he cast an illusion so real that Thanos believed he killed him. And this really makes me wonder if the classic Loki, the one played by Richard Grant, is actually our Loki. You know, because we all assumed that his neck was snapped by Thanos, um, understandably so, since that's what was depicted. But when you start doing these wibbly wobbly timey wimey stories, then everything gets called into question. Was that in fact what happened? You know, and it's. I mean, I enjoy it. It's an interesting thing to think about. Um, and we're introduced to the idea of Nexus events, which they teased in WandaVision when they talked about Nexus in the commercials. Um, so there's this synergy between the shows, obviously. You guys going to comment or say anything? It does make this more interesting for both of us, I think, if you're involved in the conversation. But anyway, so we got these Nexus events, and Nexus events are some kind of divergence from what they call the sacred timeline. Which is one that leads to some sort of calamity, and that's kind of the premise here. But there's a lot of iconography in the show that just if you're paying attention, you should know that the TVA is definitely not on the up and up from the get go. When you have this the statues of the timekeepers, this kind of religious obedience to orthodoxy about the sacred time, and the fact that they call it a sacred timeline. Just all kinds of red flags. It's very cult-like behavior. So from the get-go, you should get the impression that okay, the TVA is not exactly what it says it is. So you have to wait, go through the show to figure out, well, what is the TVA? What's the deal with them? And if you were suspicious from the get-go like I was, and you kind of get your answers at the end of the show, in the last episode. And one of the things that they was in the rumor for the longest time about the show was that Cannon was going to be in it, and there was a rumor that it would have a season 2, and the two things together, I talked to people that were MCU watchers, and it's like there's no way they can put Kang in there. It's too much for just a six episode show. But I was always kind of in the mind, if they're doing 2 seasons, now this is a big if, obviously. If they're doing 2 seasons, then they could definitely bring in Kang just at the end of the show. Even though he wasn't like the big bad for the entire, he wasn't a presence in the entire season. I figured if they were going to do a season 2, and that's the only way they could do it, though, is if it's like, okay, to be continued, kind of, and we'll see this character again later. And sure enough, they managed to do it. Now, I don't know why they don't actually name him in the show. They use He Who Remains, and they mention some other name variants like Immortus and Conqueror. Those are all variations of the same character or variants of the same character, and in the comics. So, there are a lot of comic geeks, flipping out because they actually did it. So that was cool to see. Oh man, look at that horrible circle. Jesus. Stick my shoulder out. I think I need to have the other leg coming out here too, right? Where was I? It'd help if someone was in here talking with me. Keep the flow of conversation going. Yeah, so anyway, the comic geeks were excited, and I was worried that, you know, what I consider normies, like the people that didn't grow up reading the comics and stuff, like they would see this character, he who remains, and just it wouldn't have any weight for them. So I'd like to, you know, if you didn't grow up reading comics, I'm curious what you guys thought of the reveal of Kang being the one that set up the TVA, and or he who remains being the one that set up the TVA. And did it work for you? Did you have a problem with it? Because, you know, me going in with my background in comics, you know, it didn't bother me at all. In fact, I was happy to see it. But I can understand if you didn't grow up reading comics. You'd be like, who is this guy and why should we care? What else can I talk about that certain points I want to hit? Oh, there's the one scene where we talk about pruning people, right? Or pruning people out of the timeline. And we're led to believe that pruning is killing or, you know, eliminating them from existence. So there's a scene where they prune the Loki that we've been following for this whole story. And I'll tell you, you know, for a minute there, I was on board with it. I was like, oh, wow, that was a bold choice. But the show's called Loki, and they don't specify which Loki it is. So I was thinking, well, they could actually do this. Like I said, bold choice. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I guess, that wasn't what they did. They were just setting us up for another reveal of what actually happens when someone gets pruned, and that's people going to the void. Yeah, I was like, just for a second, man, I was like, yeah, that was bold. But I was on board with it. It's like, okay, I'm with you. You wanna make this a Loki show and not have to be about the Tom Hiddleston Loki going forward? Okay, it's bold, pretty ballsy to do it in the fourth episode. But alas, that wasn't what happened. Yeah, I don't know how many of you had some kind of reaction to that scene. Nobody's gonna talk to me tonight, huh? You guys are killing me. You just like hearing me struggle to talk. Try and hold a conversation with myself. Yeah, that was an interesting scene when they pruned Loki. And then, of course, some of the other points. I mean, I'm talking to people I assume have watched the show, so if I skip all over, you can hopefully follow along with me. Um, when they were on Lamentus, um, and we've been up to this point, we've been led to believe that the timekeepers are correcting timelines by pruning people, right? And you get those nexus events, and the timeline starts to split, and they have to send in um, the timekeepers to correct things and prune the events. Um, and then they kind of try to make it seem like the Nexus event on Lamentus was the Loki's fall in love, which at the time made no sense to me. Because if they were about to die, they'd be removing themselves out of the timeline. So even if they fell in love with each other, it wouldn't affect anything going forward. And we're so glad when we got to the final episode, and we get Kang. I'm not gonna call him He Who Reigns. It's just too much of a mouthful. I'm just gonna call him Kang. And Kang reveals that he's been following everything and kind of pulling the strings as they go. And he needed them to be able to reach him there at the Void, at the Citadel at the end of time. So the Nexus event would have been them dying. That was the Nexus event, because that's the only thing that makes sense. Because when I was watching, it's like, I don't understand why they care. If they're about to die anyway, then problem solved. But the Nexus event would have been them dying, so kind of glad that was revealed, that he needed them alive. Let that dry a little bit, and then we'll erase out the pencils and throw some color on there. In the meantime, is there any version of Loki you'd like to see? I did print out some reference, so I have different things. I felt like drawing Kid Loki, but I have Sylvie, I have the various President Loki, and what are presumably other versions of Loki, because they all have these horns of some sort. Classic Loki, boastful Loki, alligator Loki. Got Mobius and Goliath, Miss Minutes, Ravonna, a random hunter. I do have notes that if I want to talk about. We talked about Loki's, but we talked about the Tom Hiddleston Loki. Obviously, it's technically not the Loki from the movies we watched. It's Loki removed out of that timeline. So this is the Loki that hasn't gone through, Ragnarok and getting to know his brother better and finding out that his dad actually loved him and his brother loved him. So this is still a jaded Loki. So you have to redo this whole growth again, but it's compressed in a 6-episode series. So it's an accelerated timeline. It's not done over a period of movies, and they do a good job. I mean, Hiddleston's a good actor. I mean, you gotta give it to Tom Hiddleston. Seeing him, I think he probably had a ball doing this show, and he's if you watch a lot of the press stuff leading up to this, let's do classic. So you watch the press leading up to this. Some of the stuff, like Hiddleston's an executive producer on the show, so he had some input, not just as a character, but as kind of a show runner input. And one of the things that he did when they started production, he's a student of the mythology, so he actually was going up and looking up the mythology for the actual Loki, and then knowing the history of his own character too. He did workshops or introductions to the mythology for the cast and crew that were making the show. Like a 2-hour introduction to the world of Loki's and the world of Norse mythology. It's pretty cool. That he's that invested in the character that he's holding the workshops for the productions, explaining motivations and backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. Glorious purpose. I'm just keeping it kind of sketchy. I'm not trying to make super accurate drawings today. The stream I did Friday, I'm tired. I'm still not really recovered. So, Darren is saying he met the voice of Miss Minutes Tara Strong back in 2019 when she was in Hawaii for Amazing Hawaii Comic Con. Yeah, she seems like a nice lady. Never met her myself. And Richard E. Grant, he called this the Kermit outfit. You see these triangle peaks around the collar, you understand why you get that Kermit feel. Draw them deliberately on the skinny side. But anyway, so it's like Tom Hiddleston would do these workshops talking about Loki and the motivations and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool. I tend to watch a lot of making ofs and interviews and stuff, just because I'm a fan of the material. You have any stories about Tara Strong, or was it just one of those photo op things? Yeah. When people say they met somebody at a convention, it's like, did you really meet them, or did you just get like a picture taken with them? Like, what do you know about the person? You say you met them at a convention. Belt design. You have like a leaf. Never noticed before. Aaron saying a bit of both, but also chat her about her roles. Like, I get to meet George Perez at one of the conventions, one of my artist heroes, but when I say I met him, I spent the day with him. I drove him around the island. Anyway, back to Loki. Aaron, what did you think of the Loki series? Anything stand out to you that you want to talk about? Anybody else disappointed that we didn't get to see Mobius on a jet ski? There's there's an artist on Instagram, Kyle. What's his name? Hold on, I gotta have it on my page, on my Facebook page. Well, Lyle Cruz. If you look up Lyle Cruz, it's at Lyle_style, at Lyle Style on Instagram. He did a riff on Luca, where it's like drawn in the Luca style, but it's Sylvie, Loki, and Mobius on a jet ski. Recommend that. Give some love. It's like a fun piece. When Richard E. Grant, you see him on interviews, is one of the funny things because he found out he was going to be playing Loki, and he was excited to get that, a superhero role. But when he went in for his fitting, he was he said he was disappointed because it wasn't a muscle suit. You know, and when you talk about, like, if you look at the old Jack Kirby um, drawings of Loki, he's actually buff. So Richard E. Grant thought he was going to get muscles for the role, but alas, that wasn't meant to be. You don't need to draw the fingers here. He has that power coming out. But so we got our Tom Hiddleston Loki. We're introduced to Sylvie, and in typical Marvel fashion, she's kind of a combination of characters. So the Enchantress is a Marvel character, which they stole some stuff from. And here's one thing I wanted to point out about all the different Lokis. They all have like magical abilities of some sort. And my postulation is that they're all the same power. It's just how they manifest it. So like we have Sylvie being an enchantress, and Loki like doing illusions and hiding stuff in pocket dimensions and stuff like that. But I think it's all the same magic power. It's just that they manifest it differently. That's my theory. What do you guys think? What? And when they have the classic Loki talking about how he tricked Thanos with an illusion so real he thought he actually killed him, and then he hid as a piece of debris and floated off into space. And then when they're trying to distract Elias, that Loki is creates an illusion, basically Asgard. I think it's pretty sure it was Asgard that he was recreating as an illusion. But that leads the titular Loki, Tom Hiddleston version, to think that maybe they're more powerful than they realize, and I think that's going to be a thematic issue going forward. That Loki's going to be more powerful. I think he'll come to the realization of that theory that I was talking about. It was like all these powers you've seen manifested by the different Lokis. It's all the same power. It's just how he's manifesting it. So when you see like Sylvie could do the enchanting, I think you're going to see the Tom Hiddleston Loki doing enchanting. You see, well, he already Kid Loki's doing the daggers out of nothing kind of thing, and short swords and stuff like that. And I think this Loki, our Loki, is already doing that kind of stuff. But, I don't know about the alligator. I'm not really aware of any alligator Lokis either in Norse mythology or in the comics, so I'm not sure where that came from. I'm not real super familiar with Ghost Loki either. So that's the good thing though is the show can do stuff that even comic nerds don't know about. So they can still surprise people, which is a good thing. And what else I want to talk about? I want to talk about some diversity, and this is I'm going to talk about it from a light point of view. I'm not going to try and get heavy about it, but one of the things I'm really enjoying about like getting these shows with a more diverse cast is it's forcing us to say names and stuff that we would never have dealt with. I mean, I grew up with a lot of Jims and James and Bobs and Roberts and Kevins and Bruces, but now we're getting like Gugu and Raw and what are some of the other characters in the show? Hold on, let me have a guide up real quick so I can kind of look up people. I had gas. I have gas. So, so Sophia Di Martino is Sylvie. Gugu Mbatha-Raw is Ravonna Renslayer. Wunmi Musaku, sorry, with the U. Wunmi Musaku was Hunter P15. So it's good for me as an old guy to see, all these wildly different names. I mean, I know a lot of the kids are still, complaining, and the fight goes on to get more representation in media. But for an older viewer, I'm really enjoying seeing all this stuff coming out. I'm Vietnamese, Asian background, and like as a kid growing up watching American television, there was no Vietnamese people. The only Koreans that we had in TV were like Pat Morita as on Happy Days, or the one character on Barney Miller, or MASH. We had Koreans in MASH, and then it was one of those things. Also, like any Asian could play any Asian in those days. So it didn't matter whether the Asian was Chinese, Japanese, Korean. They would play all those races. There was just no subtlety, no differentiation. So I mean, I get the fight continues, but man, when I look at where we were and where we are now, I'm happy. I'm really happy to see the progress we've made. Some of the others, see, Eugene Cordero was Hunter K5 Echo. Diobia, I apologize if I'm messing up these up. Opari as Boastful Loki. Serafina King is Minuteman 9. But getting these diverse cast members, and you start getting these names out into the zeitgeist that help make a difference, I think, and get people to understand that not everybody is a Jim or a Bob or a Tim. There are so many more flavors in the world. I'm glad that we're seeing that more and more in media. I get, that some people maybe feel threatened by that, but I think you just need to let that go and embrace it. Leslie says she has an upset stomach. She was going to come in. Leslie is a super Loki fan, Leslie Hogue. But, stuff happens. I was expecting her to come in. or at least come by to chat. All right. Okay, there's a quick sketch of classical. So I'll go back to this one. It should be dry enough now for me to erase out the pencils. Going to the Kango at all, the He Who Remains. Like I said, I mean, I can understand why normies might get the feeling like, why should we care? Who is this character? But let's talk about that, because this, for a TV show going into Phase 4 of the MCU, this has huge implications. The Kang, and the character that plays He Who Remains, Kang, is already slated to show up in the next Ant-Man movie in 2023, and I think we may see him again before then. Maybe in part of the Multiverse of Madness as a stinger or something, with Doctor Strange next year in 2022. I don't think we'll see him in Shang-Chi, but I could be wrong. But he's gonna be your big bad. And the thing is, when you start dealing with multiverses, and we talk about implications, what kind of implications this show has, Marvel has given themselves a get out of jail free card for whatever they want to do story wise, and people have kind of bought onto it now with Loki's variants and timelines. So we've seen that a variant doesn't have to look like our version of the character. So if we have a variant Black Panther, for example, I mean, I know it's sad to think about Chadwick Boseman's passing, and we're resistant to recast him, but having a multiverse makes that much easier to do. Say it's still Black Panther, it's just not our Black Panther, it's a different Black Panther from another universe. And if they do this thing where you can see at the end of Loki the timeline is just splitting like crazy, and you're going to have to try and consolidate that back down. I don't want to call it a sacred timeline, but I'll just call it a manageable timeline. You're going to have to try and consolidate it down. But when they do that, they can start picking and choosing characters from different universes, quote unquote universes, and bring them into a single universe. So this can give us our Fantastic Four. This can give us X-Men. It's just they've just thrown the doors open for whatever they want to do at this point. They can do recastings now. If they want to have somebody else come in and be a new Iron Man, if they want to have a new Captain America, they can do that because they have this multiverse thing to play with. So when people look at this show and they see Kang at the end and go, why should I care about this guy? I'm just pointing out that the implications are really wide-reaching. Whether or not they'll do all that stuff, we'll see. But the fact is, the simple matter is, they could do it now. They open the door for themselves and all that stuff. And they can, they've given themselves the ability to retcon just about anything too if they need to. Now, as a viewer, it's not always fun when they retcon stuff. I get it. As a comic book reader, with decades of comic books out there, there's a lot of comic books on the shelves with characters that I theoretically know, but I look at the books and these aren't characters I recognize anymore. So you can have that problem. But from a cinematic standpoint, this gives them the ability to keep making movies for as long as they can get people to watch them, because you don't have to worry about actors aging out, because you can always multiverse them into somebody else. grayish green. Multiple different shades of green here. Mobius. Now, this was one of the concerns I had coming into the show was Owen Wilson, because Owen Wilson is Owen Wilson. It's hard to see anything with Owen Wilson when he's in a role. And unfortunately, I think that holds true for Mobius. I mean, Mobius is basically Owen Wilson, but it works. And I think it works because he gets to do the understated psychology and stuff. So he gets to know those. Oh, I just realized he's got wings on his ears. Just throw him off at the end like this. So the woe dude actually kind of works in this. Wow, that Owen Wilson. It's hard. It's hard not to get him in that role. So the trick is just to make that role work for what you need in the show. And, I think they managed to do that. And personally, your mileage may vary, of course. Everything's so overcast, green. I'm not sure what his hair color is, but I think it's just going to be like a dark black, right? Let's go with that. Let's see. I want to call it a V, but I understand it's supposed to be horns. The horns should be also. I said I'm keeping to a pretty sketchy, cartoony style today, just so I can get through stuff without trying to think too hard about how accurate it is. And I'll probably give us away at the next comic jam or something, and just, or if somebody wants it, message me, give me an address, and I can mail it to you. Don't be worried about what I do with the end. What else have we thought on? Hunter B-15 was I like what they did with this character, where she was like the no nonsense field agent, the one that hunted down the variants, and they managed to make her the one that was able to question what Sylvie did and what she showed the other hunter that they said went crazy and had to be put down. And there's the scene where Sylvie takes her back to that one annihilation event or extinction event kind of thing, with the Rocks Cart store. And this is where she just does a fantastic job showing, where she says, "I looked happy." You can watch her face as she's reliving the memories that Sylvie's showing her. It's just a beautiful scene, and it's one of those, what she was seeing, but the acting that she did to sell it was fine. And you don't need to see the scene. Um, who's the actor that played B-15, 100 B-15 again? It was Wunmi Musaku. So Wunmi Musaku, if you ever see this, outstanding job on that. I know she'll never see it, so I can say you can see that, right? Yeah, she really sold that scene that you could watch her, the memories playing out in her head. Ravonna Renslayer, that's Gugu and Baccarat. I haven't watched a lot of shows recently, like the Lovecraft Country and Watchmen and some of these other shows where a lot of these actors are coming up from. So I think this is the first time I've seen her. She does a great job being suspect the whole time, right? For those of you that play that Among Us, she's very sus from the get go. Kind of bought into the drank the Kool-Aid, as it were, right? She does a good job showing that. And we get to the end, and it's like, well, what is her motivation? And then this is where like a little comic knowledge can go a long way too, because in the comics, her character is in a relationship with Kang, or a Kang. So I don't know if the show will go there, but when they tease at the end that she's going off to find some of that free will that they were talking about, and her implication being that the only ones that have free will are the ones making the decisions, or the ones running things. Well, that's a little power hungry thing there. It's like the only way I'm going to have free will is if I'm the one calling the shots, and I don't think she's going to call the shots, but she's definitely going to be a toady for the person that is. It seems like. That, I may be wrong about that, but certainly seems like the case. And then, like Miss Minutes gives her that information in the end for her to do what she needs to do to save the timeline. So you wonder if she goes and finds the lesser evil Kang, which is the one presumably that set up the TVA that we saw, but she's power hungry. She could actually be the catalyst that makes a worse timeline. Because she's seen the good timeline, but in that timeline she didn't have all the power she would have liked. So I can see her being even more duplicitous and evil going forward as the one that, she could have actually gone and seen the Kang that we saw in this show, but turned him, made him more evil. We'll see. But I did like that kind of Planet of the Apes moment there at the end when, Tom Hiddleston's Loki is kicked through the portal by Sylvie and winds up back at the TVA, and it turns out not to be the TVA from his timeline, or the timeline he left from. That was probably a gut punch for a lot of people when Mobius didn't recognize him. Kind of looks like somebody I know. Little, little kid Loki. Again, if somebody wants this, message me. I can send it to you. No charge. Just throw it in an envelope and mail it off. What else do I want to talk about? Kang was played by, let's see. I know he was just recently in Lovecraft Country, but I haven't watched that. Jonathan Majors. And like I said, he was cast like over a year ago, I want to say, for Ant-Man 3, Ant-Man and the Wasp. The third Ant-Man movie. So for those of us that follow the MCU movie news, we've known Kang was coming for a long time. But we weren't sure as if they would use the TV shows to introduce such a big character. And sure enough, they did. There's a dad joke in here for you. Because my daughter was asking me, well, we're leading into Multiverse of Madness. How come Doctor Strange didn't show up to deal with this? I mean, other than the fact that, well, it's not his show. I pointed out that, you see Kang eating an apple, and an apple takes his doctor away. I'll show you. Dad jokes. Dad jokes. Dad jokes. Dad jokes. Don't grow any right now. I'm going to leave this white here because I'm going to come up with some green paint to cover up the lines a bit. And I'll give him some of that Loki power. This is a costume I never thought I'd see in live action in a movie. So, props. This is one of the things that when Marvel first started, they were trying to make more. I want to say more practical, realistic suits. Something that more believable, I guess. But as we get further into the MCU, and we're 12 years in now, 13 years into the MCU. They're at the point where they're just saying, "Fuck it, we're doing this. We're going to show you a comic accurate suit for for Loki, and you're gonna like it." And they did it. And, I mean, they did like tease stuff like this in the Luke Cage episode, show on Netflix where they showed a kind of a comic actor, although it wasn't really. But and they made fun of it. But here, nobody says anything about his costume in the show. Nobody's taking a shot at it. Nobody's making fun of it. Although, Richard E. Grant, on the interview circuit was kind of dishing on the outfit, but nobody in the show mentions it. It's just, this is his outfit. And, even though it looks ridiculous at first, And you sit with it a little bit, and it's like, okay, I'm just gonna roll with it. I'm not too worried about this because I am going to come in with a more opaque green to knock out the blacks that I put down earlier. Glorious purpose. What do you think about my theory that the Richard E. Grant Loki, the classic Loki, is actually our Loki, the one from our movie timeline? And he basically told you what he did. He made an illusion so real, it fooled Thanos, and he floated away as debris. That could be our Loki. You think about it. It was so real, it fooled the audience. No? You guys don't think so? I thought it was a strong possibility when he talked about that scene. It just threw everything into doubt. It's like maybe this is our Loki. It makes sense. No? And find something to do the shade for the yellow area. I want to do gold for the metal or orange for the metal. I don't want this to look like metal. I want it to look round. Not dark enough to make a difference. I did the. Let me test this out real quick. Put this on the top of that. Too hard. Too harsh. Yeah. See, like for the metal parts, I'll use more of an orange. But for the cloth parts, I don't want it to stand out too much. I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm just one way to show a difference in material is the way it bounces light and color. Pieces coming down the cloth. Bag gray. YR000 flash. Caucasian dude. Start my music over. Okay. Let's see. Talk a little bit about playing. Talk about classic Loki. Kid Loki. Now this is one I didn't get in the comics. It's kind of after my time as a comic book reader. And so I was really hoping Leslie would be here because I know Leslie is a huge Kid Loki fan. She cosplayed different versions of him. I'm sure she'll cosplay, and I probably had to get a stuffed alligator to go with him. Too bad she couldn't be here for this. Not feeling well. It happened. Hope you feel better, Leslie, and Look forward to seeing whatever you do with it. I know you're going to do a Kid Loki costume, so look forward to seeing whatever it is you end up doing with it. Kid Loki, I can't speak too intelligently on the background of Kid Loki from the comics, so just pass my time. He's a newer comic iteration, but one of the things that the MCU is setting up for the future, and you've seen this in the other Disney shows, is they're setting up for Young Avengers, and Kid Loki is a candidate for Young Avengers. We've got Speed and Wiccan in WandaVision, their sons in WandaVision, Speed and Wiccan. We got potentially Patriot in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's Isaiah Bradley's nephew. So he could take up the mantle of Patriot. We know Hawkeye's coming out. He's be training his daughter. We're getting Miss Marvel coming up. I think before the year is out. She's a Young Avenger. So seeing Kid Loki in this show just makes me think we'll probably see, if not this particular actor, we'll probably see this character again. And I'm fine if they get this particular actor too. I mean, didn't get a whole lot from him, so I don't know how strong he is, but what he did in the show was fun. Talking about Kid Loki, Alligator Loki. I think that was just made up for the show. I really do. I don't think that was pulled from anything. I know some people had said it's kind of a variation of Frog, the Thor frog, but I'm not sure what the logic is in that thinking. But I just think the writers' room would go, "What would be ridiculous? What if we have an alligator? Alligators are green." All right. I don't think it was much more in depth than that, really. I think they just were having fun with it. Just fine. Boastful Loki, I've never seen before. It's kind of interesting to see that his hammer has some weird stuff going on. You see, I think these are fists. At the top of his hammer is like fists sticking out of it. And then the handle looks like it's a wrench. Should go try and get some decent screenshots of that and draw that character sometime. Crazy looking. I don't know why they call him Boastful Loki, though. You didn't seem too braggadocious in the show. You guys think he was boastful? Let's see, who else we got? President Loki. That was just kind of a throwback to the short comic story where they did President Loki. That's this one here with the vote button on, or the Loki button on. It was kind of fun to see Alligator Loki take off his hand. And I don't know if they're going to do this, but it used to be when Disney and Lucas acquired Lucasfilms and the Star Wars franchise, there was kind of a running gag in every show they did where somebody had to lose a hand. And, you watch out Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you see somebody lose a hand. And Luke Cage, obviously, Misty Knight loses a whole arm. But you go back and watch all the previous MCU or Marvel television shows after the acquisition of Star Wars, and at least one character in every show loses a hand. So I don't know if this is going to be a nod to that or not. I would kind of like it to be. Oh, and here's another thing for the multiverse we were talking about. This is, everybody that didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., doesn't care about it, whether or not it's canon, but now the fans of the show that, like myself, there's there's a small, slim opportunity for them to say, "Oh, it's still canon. It's just a different universe." So we could have that pulled. You could have that thread pulled. I don't know if it'll happen. You know, I think I just want a reason to see Ming-Na Wen in the MCU. Or get Clark Gregg back. And I don't know if any of you watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There were some really great actors in that show. That I think would be great on a big screen. Ian DeCasticker is Agent Fitz. He's a great actor. I don't say Chloe Bennett's a strong actress, but serviceable. Henry Simmons, I'd like to see him. I think he should have been Luke Cage, but that's a discussion for another time, I guess. Goliath is from the comics, but that's kind of past my time. I remember reading Goliath. People were saying it looked like the cave from the animated Aladdin. I thought it looked. If you remember the old Mummy movie, they had the sandstorm with face. That's what it reminded me of. And then Gator Loki. Gator Loki. Well, speaking of Easter eggs, because I said that Gator Loki may have been kind of a riff off of the Thor frog. When we first go to the Void and they do that scene where they pan from the surface level through the ground down to the bowling alley throne room. If you haven't already seen the spoiler for it, you see Mjolnir in the dirt, and then they keep panning down, and there's a jar with a frog in it. And the frog is just like Thor. So they actually did Throg. It's kind of a throwaway, but it's a nice little Easter egg for the fans of the comics. Let's see, I talked about Loki's magic being all the same, just different manifestations. The TVA being all variants. So one thing in the comics, it'll be interesting to see if they lean into that, which I doubt they will because it's more special effects. But in the comics, there's a version of the TVA that is all variants of Mobius. They're out of the way, Would you want to see an army of Owen Wilsons running the TVA? Could be interesting. Some of the other Easter eggs, especially in that 5th episode in The Void, they were just Easter eggs right and left. The Thanos copter. That's actually from the animated version and toy, but company's trying to sell toys. So what if we had a Thanos copter? We'll just make a helicopter and have Thanos written on it. So that's something that actually exists in comics and in animation. You see what looks like the Stark Tower, but if you look at it closely, it's got a sign on it that says Kang, but it's Kang, but it's spelled differently, and that's an allusion to a version of Kang from the comics that who's ostensibly a good guy. I think all of the Kangs in some form end up being evil somehow, but maybe mistaken. There's a lot of different versions of the character running around. This is a paint pen, if you're wondering. Quick classic Loki. Again, if you like the classic Loki, just message me. I can mail it to you free of charge. Just throw it in an envelope with a stamp on it. I think I want to draw one One shot of Sylvie. Again, we'll try and keep it kind of light. I have an idea in my head where I want to. I don't want to try and do it during the stream, but I have an idea where I have her like kicking Loki through the portal while jumping at Kang to stab him. Kang jumping back. It's something in my head I want to try and get on paper, but we'll see if I ever get around to it. Um, the actress that plays Sylvie is actually suitable for art because she's got a lot of angularity to her face, so I don't have to worry about soft curves as much. So this one's still going to be cartoony, but a little more accurate. She's got a roll in her eyes. And then I wasn't a huge Doctor Who watcher, but I'm told by all my Doctor Who watching fans that watched Loki that this is a very Doctor Who feeling show. If you're a Doctor Who fan, I'd like your opinion on that. I don't know. Let me know. Does it feel like a high budget, like a high budget Doctor Who? Does that sound right? Just the one horn. Let's see. Face stuff on. No, it's not matching the reference. Let's just make a maybe kind of a smirk. Stuff up a little bit. All right, good enough sketch. Trying to keep things simple. Let's see. Alternate timelines. Did we talk about Citadel at the end of time? Oh, where do you guys think this void and the Citadel at the end of time is? Because this is where I think we get the tie into Ant-Man. So I really suspect that the void and the Citadel at the end of time, and possibly even the TVA, are actually in the quantum realm. Um, Anybody have any thoughts on that? Timelines, balancing magic. You think we'll ever see Mobius on a jet ski? I hope so. I hope that was in Owen Wilson's writer. Like, I'll do this character, but at some point in the show, I have to have a jet ski. And you just go, oh, well, okay, sure. You can see that, right? There's an interesting tidbit for Sylvie. Um, what's her name again? Sophie? Sophia DiMartino had just given birth before she took this role. So the costume was designed for quick release so she could pump for breastfeeding. There's a weird picture online that you can find where she's showing how she doesn't show her probes or anything. Don't go there, but you can see how the costume unzips for quick access. All right. That Cell Sylvie. Dude, when I do these streaming sessions, I should, when I'm doing reviews anyway, I should probably just stick to a more cartoony style. Just like draw without thinking so hard. Um, okay, I'll color this up and then I'll wrap it up. Um, Anybody has any thoughts on Loki you want to talk about while I'm finishing up the color on this? Please throw it in the chat and we'll go over it. You know, I want to be your nerd safe space here. You know, throw out what you want to talk about. There's questions, comments, concerns, gripes, complaints. I'm gonna add in eyelashes and stuff after I get this down. I don't have any comments on Loki. Huh? I have to encourage you all to talk to me. Throw stuff in the chat. I don't know. I can go the gray with the green. And the shoe is ostensibly green, but it's like a very dark green, so it's basically gray. All right, I'm going to put this offer out one more time. If you would like any of the drawings from the stream tonight, let me know which one. Message me. Give me an address. You can use a post office box or a work address or whatever. So we don't want to give out your personal information. I understand. I'll throw it in the mail. Otherwise, next Sunday when I go to Comic Jam, I'll just give away the sketches. There's the Lokis from today. Having some fun with it. Thank you for watching. Someday I'm going to get you guys to come talk with me, either in chat or in the stream. I'm not sure what I'm going to be, what my next topic's going to be. Probably won't be a review or anything, because that's too much thinking for me. I'm just going to talk about a character I like or something. Yeah, anyway, well, thanks for hanging out for those of you that actually stuck with it. See you next time.